Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. It is Friday. Hooray. Hope you had a good week. Hope you have something fabulous planned for your weekend. I actually spent time with a new friend today, so that was exciting. I'm not hugely social. That would be my hubby. I am the introvert in our family. He is the extrovert. We balance each other pretty well. But today I actually spent time with what I hope will become a regular friend, and we had a great time. We talked about all kinds of stuff, and it was really good. So yay me is what I say. Yay Friday, yay me. Yay to just all kinds of good stuff. Yay to another author interview. We are moving on to young adult urban fantasy today, as I think I mentioned in the end of the last episode. I am speaking with author J. Michael White today about his book. It is the first in a series of probably 7 books. I think that's what he said, but he covers that in the interview. So if my memory is failing me, the book is called Just in Case and the Masters of Dragon Metal. Humankind lost the battle for its soul without knowing. Evil won, and no chosen ones are coming to the rescue. Enter Just in Case, a foster kid on the run in Chicago. He finds himself drawn into the underbelly of civilization, where the 3 great schools of magic are crippled by their own corruption and unable to push back against the great dark. Monsters from Babylonian myth, demons, and the enthralled thrive beneath the notice of everyone. Only one force of good remains, an ancient magic called dragon metal, and Justin is determined to learn its secrets. But how much of a difference can one person make in a world that's already fallen? There's no fate, no destiny, only metal, and those brave enough to wield it. So that is the description of, again, it's called Just in Case and the Masters of Dragon Metal. Yes, we're going to talk about why the main character's name is Just in Case, a play on words. This is, as I said, young adult. It is urban fantasy. It is a great beginning to a series. It leaves you wanting to learn more, but, it gives you enough. Obviously, it leaves a lot of things hanging because it's a fantasy book, and that's what they do. But it does not leave you in such a cliffhanger that you just want to scream at the book, which I always appreciate. I like a good balance in my endings, right? Leave me wanting more. Don't leave me wanting to throw the book at the author's head. So, Jason, good job. I don't want to throw the book at your head, but I do, as you know, like young adult. I like fantasy. I like urban fantasy. And Justin he's a smart aleck. He is sarcastic. He is not special. And that's made pretty clear in the book. He's not special. He's not spent the first 15 years of his life not realizing that he was magical in some way. He's just a regular kid. He's had a not so good life, and he gets drawn into this, but he doesn't have these latent abilities like you often find in fantasy books. And there's nothing wrong with those storylines. There's nothing wrong with the trope of latent abilities, finding out something that you didn't know about yourself. But he has he's a different journey. He has a different struggle to figure out how he is going to help this cause when he has been told his whole life he's nothing special, when he believes he is nothing special. And that's definitely part of his character arc. So, enough from me. Let's go ahead and turn now to the interview. Again, it is called Just in Case and the Masters of Dragon Metal. It is the first in this series. The author is J. Michael White. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We are going to talk about your book, Just in Case, and hold on, sorry, my computer just froze. I apologize. This is also why we're not live, because sometimes I have technical difficulties. Come on. It's been a long day. I'm actually in Portugal, so it's 6:00 here. So it's been a long day.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I apologize. Let me start that again.
Okay.
I'm excited to have you on the podcast. I'm excited to talk about your book, Just in Case, and the Masters of Dragon Metal. Before we get to the book, though, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Sure. My name is Jason. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was a reporter for a very long time. I eventually switched careers to just kind of the IT space, so I would have more spare time to focus on my fiction writing. This was my first book that came out. It was in May, and the sequel's coming up next year, so I'm really just kind of focusing on that series.
Sure. Can you give an overview of the story? And as part of that overview, can you decide why you named your main character what you named him?
Sure. No, that's a good question. So in terms of the name, I wanted his name to stand for Justice, which is Justin, but that's too common. So I switched it to Justin. And then it was important for this guy. He's not a typical hero. He's not a chosen one. There are no prophecies in the world of this book. So I thought it was fitting if his name were to be a joke, which is acknowledged in the story. So I thought Just in Case was kind of some fun wordplay. And it's fitting for the character, especially after you read the book, and kind of see how he acts and how he behaves and how he thinks of himself. So that's in terms of how I got the idea for the story. I wanted to make kind of a modern Oliver Twist, but with supernatural elements and demons and that type of thing. And that's still in the story. It just got a lot bigger. I started kind of pulling from story ideas that I had written years ago, just some Babylonian mythology and that type of thing, for example. But the core of the idea was Oliver Twist, but with demons. So.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that for sure. And I really love that because of the nature of Justin's personality. I mean, I don't know if he is the way he is because his name is a pun, or if sarcasm is just that deeply ingrained in him, but it really is a perfect name.
Thanks. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about Justin as the main character? What about him do you think will resonate with readers?
I think he's pretty relatable. He's kind of a common kid. He's average at a lot of things. He doesn't have supernatural abilities that he was born with or anything like that. He's funny. He's an orphan, and we all know that some of the most relatable characters in the fiction world are orphans. So I just think people, and especially from what I've heard from feedback from readers the past few months, people just relate to him because he seems real. He seems like a good kid who's just had a really, really rough life. There are really bad things that have happened to him, and people can relate to that. So,
yeah, absolutely. And he.
Okay, you've gotten a bit more of an understanding about the book and the series, so let's go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more about Justin and how he doesn't fit with your typical young adult fantasy hero. In some ways he does, but in a lot of ways he doesn't. So we'll be talking more about that. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do. All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with J. Michael White about the first book in his young adult urban fantasy series. Let's go ahead and return to that interview.
He does and he does not follow your typical hero's journey because he, as you said, he's not a chosen one. He's just kind of an average kid, but he doesn't let that stop him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also a big part of the story and something he has to learn is that you can make a difference in the world, but if you want to make a difference, you have to fight for it. It takes effort. You have to get up and try and work hard. That's an important message in the story, I think. So,
This is urban fantasy, so it's set in contemporary Chicago. What kinds of world building did you do in terms of the more supernatural elements of the story?
I drew from unrelated story ideas. They were originally unrelated story ideas that I had written years and years ago, specifically Babylonian mythology. When I was first telling myself I was going to write a book, which is years and years ago, I thought Babylonian mythology would be a good place to start because I didn't see a lot of that at the time in the fiction I was reading or the TV shows that I was watching. So I learned a lot about that mythology, and that was pretty key to the story. I also kind of looked to just areas of pop culture that I was a fan of. So TV shows like Supernatural and Buffy all kind of inspired this series as a whole. Book series that I liked also inspired kind of some of the world building in the series. I've had a few different people who have been kind enough to leave reviews say that the book kind of read to them like a love letter to geekdom. So it's just because it has a lot of pop culture references and some of that inspiration, but it's put together in a way that hopefully comes across as unique. So,
Yeah. You mentioned the Babylonian mythology, which you were interested in prior to this, but what kinds of research then went into the making of the book?
So I always start, whenever I'm researching world building or new characters, I start poking around online, but that only like scratches the surface. So what I look for is in an article, maybe if in an online article they have list books as references. So I'll actually go and I'll buy some of those books and then I'll read them. So I spend a lot of money on Amazon buying books, reading tons and tons of research books that I don't. I might read an entire book just for one page in the novel. So I don't know if it's worth it to do that much research, but it's fun for me. For example, another good example in the book, there's the three great schools of magic. Those schools are very much intertwined with religion. They're supposed to represent religion can be a great thing. It can be a beautiful, wonderful, helpful thing. But there are people out there in the world who use religion for selfish purposes and for greed and for hate. And that's kind of what the three schools of magic represent, because they're supposed to be evil organizations. But I just did a lot of research about the history of religion, just to kind of think about how these three schools might have come into existence. And you don't see a lot of that at all in the first book, but you'll start to see more of it in the second and third one.
you mentioned, I don't know if it's worth reading the whole book or something for the page that you use, but then you said it's fun. So I think it's definitely worth it. And plus, you can tell that there's research behind what you're reading, even if you're not seeing all of the bones of that research.
That's good. Thank you. That's a good point.
How much then, like, character development? So before you start writing, do you have a really good sense of your characters, or do they kind of evolve as you write, a combination of both? How does that work for you?
That's a good question. I normally start out writing a few paragraphs for each character if they're a new character. If they're an existing character, I'll still kind of write out a few paragraphs of the journey that they're going to go on. However, most of the time, the evolution of the character in the actual story, once I start to write, doesn't follow that path that I think it's going to follow, which is a good thing. I always love it when stories write themselves. But a good example of that right now, I'm writing the third book in the series. I'm only on the third chapter, and there are a few things I can tell are already going to be going in a completely different direction than when I started plotting that story. So I definitely don't go too heavy on the story architecture, plotting out every single plot point and every chapter. I just kind of write down a general idea of what I want to do, and then I just go and let the story kind of tell itself from there.
Has Growly McKissy Face forgiven you for naming him Growly McKissy Face?
No, he actually. So it'll be established in the second book that he actually prefers that name.
Okay, but I mean, I like it.
Yeah, but there, he's definitely the breakout star of the book. I think just thinking back to all the feedback that I've gotten from readers, who I'm always humbled to hear from them. But all the feedback about the cat has been totally positive. He clearly is based on, well, I guess not clearly, but yes, he's based on my cat. My cat's name is Max, though, not Growly McKissy Face. And I truly didn't intend for that to be his name. It just, he said it once as I was writing, and then it just stuck. In the book, you do kind of learn what his true name is, and that was the name I originally intended to give him, but that's just not the name that he got in the story. So. Right.
And I want to say more, but I also don't want to give things away, as they unfold throughout the story. So,
and also a funny thing about him, I was talking about how stories write themselves. Originally, that cat was just going to be in the first chapter, just as a mechanism for Justin kind of to have someone to tell his story to. Just the idea of him talking to a cat in an alley, and that was going to be the end of it. But the cat ended up following him, and it just kind of grew from there. So,
yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about Dragon Metal, which is, in the title of the book, plays a lot. I don't want you to give a lot of away, but can you talk more about Dragon Metal and how it functions within the story?
Sure, that's another good question. So, in this world, the Earth has been cut off from the source of all magic, meaning people can't use magic anymore unless they have relics, which are items that were imbued with magic before the Earth was cut off from the magical source. And in terms of Dragon Metal, as of book one, is kind of known as the last great force for good. There are these 12 powerful medallions, 12 powerful relics. Each one has a different kind of power signature. It's very much based on kind of anime or Japanese live action ideas that I've kind of seen in the past. Even I would say, like, there's some Power Rangers influence there a little bit, just in terms of how those work. But they're important to the story. You don't know a lot about them or where they're from. You do start to learn a little bit more of that in book two when that comes out next year. But they're basically just these magical items that give you superpowers, essentially. So.
That's so funny that you mentioned the Power Rangers, because I had that thought at one point when you were describing some of the characters with the dragon metals.
Time for our second break of the podcast, but fun fact, weird fact, I don't know, fact about me, never really seen the Power Rangers. They were on Saturday mornings at some point during my
youthful innocence. I don't know how old I was, but I never really watched much. Here and there, never got into them. Doesn't mean that they were bad. I just never got into them. I think I was at the wrong age or the wrong interest level when they were popular. Don't know. Anyway, time for that second break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author J. Michael White. Do you include autobiographical elements within your writing?
Not in terms of my own life that I've lived, but in terms of things that I've experienced just from my past as a journalist. So especially in this first book, I talk a lot about the foster care system. About 90% of what I talk about in that book are things that I've seen, or kids that I've known or met. So there's a lot of the social commentary aspects of the book are based on real observations or stories that I've done as a reporter and those types of things. So, really, and there probably is a little bit of every character, I would say, because I'm writing them. So
right.
I would imagine there's a little me in every one of them.
I think really specifically, I was curious. Justin, aside from his name, also speaks with a lot of wordplay and things like dragon medal and dragon, and there are medals, MEDAL, and so he keeps making these puns about needing metal to have a medal for dragon. Do you talk like that sometimes, or did you just put that into Justin?
I don't. That's just one of his quirks that kind of came out. But I am very sarcastic, or more so. I was more so when I was younger than I am now. But his sarcasm is definitely a part of me. So
sure.
Or I should say my sarcasm is definitely a part of him.
Yeah, sure. You've mentioned 3 books, one just in the very first process of being written. Do you have an arc for the series? Are you going to keep writing until the ideas run out, or what does that look like for you?
So that's another good question. I have 7 planned right now. With the second one is going through a final proofread. That'll be out next year. And then my goal is to have 1 a year. And then in between those main books, I'm going to have a series of just little novellas to flesh out some of the side characters. For example, there's one I wrote about Aiden that is going to be going through copy editing. I think my editor is scheduled to work on it and not until January. So late next year, that'll come out. So there's going to be a main series, but there's definitely going to be short story collections and novellas to flesh out some of the side characters. Because there's a lot of content that I had to cut from both the first book and the second book that revolved around some of the side characters. Like there's a guy named Aiden, there's a girl named Zadie, there's a kid named Everett. There's a lot of characters that I have some really rich backstories for that I want to explore. So I'll probably be using novellas more and more as we move forward to flesh them out a bit.
Wonderful. What do you think it is about the fantasy genre that draws you to writing within that genre?
I think it's just some of it is wish fulfillment, just this idea of, I guess it's not just in fantasy, even going back to when I was a kid, shows like Karate Kid, where it was like the underdog, kind of facing these big, tougher opponents and overcoming obstacles. It just there's the idea of the underdog facing obstacles, growing as a person. That's a really popular story archetype for a reason. I know that's not just fantasy, but I feel like that works really well in the fantasy world when you add all those fantastical elements. I don't know why. I've never really thought about why that fantasy genre interests me as much as it does. I think it's just really it's fascinating. It's even though it's all fake, when it's done right, it's always based off of real world things. There's a lot of potential for symbolism. I'm just rambling at this point. So, short answer is because it's fun.
Okay, that makes sense. In terms of the characters in the book, Justin is definitely attracted to another male character in the book. Did you start out wanting to have LGBTQIA plus inclusivity, or did Justin kind of inform that character? How did that work in terms of Justin?
That was something that I wanted to include. It was important to me, but I wanted it to be in a way that was different from other things that I'd read and other things I'd seen on TV. A lot of times when you have a gay character or a bi character or LGBT in general, a lot of times when you have that character, that's how they're defined in the story. The story is about them being gay, or their character arc is about being gay. So for him, we don't even actually say the words gay or bi or LGBT or identify his sexual preference in the story. As you said, he's a kid. He's a guy who has an attraction to another guy who's had attractions to a guy before. He's a guy who likes guys. So that's not the story. It brings a sense of normalcy to it, I think. And that's what I wanted to include. Just
Right.
It's normal. It's not presented as something that's a struggle or something that's a big deal. It just happens to be part of the story. So.
Right. Because if you're reading a story about a straight protagonist, they're just attracted to someone of the opposite sex. It's not, we don't have to dissect why that is.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were a journalist, so you've written in various capacities throughout your career, but is it writing for publication something that you've always wanted to do, or how did you come to that point in your life?
It's something that I think I've always wanted to do. I remember writing when I was a real little kid, like first grade, even writing stories and little notebooks. So I've always written just for fun. And around college is when I decided I wanted to write a book, but I never really got it done until COVID came around. During quarantine, I found myself with a lot more spare time, and I kind of used that time to get cracking on finally getting a book published. So COVID, which was obviously terrible and hurt a lot of people, the silver lining for me was it kind of gave me some free time. And even now, I'm still working remote. We're never going to be going back into an office setting. So without having to commute back and forth to a job every day, that's really helped me with finding time for writing and that type of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many sentences or stories start with, and then COVID happened, and everything that's come out of that.
Time for the final break of the podcast. When we return, Jason will be sharing his advice for authors who may be interested in writing young adult or urban fantasy. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Golden State State Media Concepts social media podcast. Time to hashtag everything. We talk about all the fun, crazy stories on social media, from Instagram to Facebook, Twitter to Tumblr, or probably even Friendster. Join us each week as we explore the quirky side of social media. It's the Golden State Media Concepts social media podcast.
It's simple, such a sad song. The one that we rely on to get us.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview. I am speaking with author J. Michael White. We are talking about the first book in his new fantasy, urban fantasy, young adult series, Just in Case, and the Masters of Dragon Metal. Let's return to that interview.
Do you have advice for aspiring authors, especially someone who might want to write YA or fantasy or urban fantasy?
Yeah, I guess my advice would be find the advice that works the best for you. So what I mean by that, there are a lot of authors that have a lot of advice. I've found some of it helpful. I've found some of it useless, but that's really not because of the advice itself. It's about what works for me. So I know for me personally, Neil Gaiman is a good person to listen to when he talks about writing. He talks about how you should just tell the story truthfully and the way it needs to be told. And other than that, there aren't really any rules that matter. And to me, that was something that really helped me, really helped me to start moving forward on my first book. And then another author that's helped me, the Dune author, before he died, he wrote this article talking about how, he didn't write Dune for commercial success. He didn't even let himself think about commercial success. He just decided, okay, these are the themes I want to hit in my story. This is the story I want to tell. He put his head down and he just focused on telling that story. And I found that helpful as well, because it can be really distracting if you're thinking about commercial success while you're writing the book. It's a distraction. It can be crippling at times. So that's the advice that helped me. But I think it's important to just kind of listen to what different authors have to say. Pick something that resonates with you and use that advice. So.
Yeah, I've spoken with other authors before who've said similar things in terms of write the story that's in you to write or what you're interested in writing, as opposed to thinking about commercial success or maybe even what's popular right now. If you write the story to try to make it be what's popular right now, it's not going to be your story.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's completely true.
When you take the time to read for yourself, you mentioned Neil Gaiman, what other authors do you turn to for your personal reading?
The Dresden Files by Jem Butcher, I really enjoyed that series. Terry Brooks, The Sword of Shannara, which I found him in kind of a funny way. Years and years ago, I wanted to write a story where it was a medieval setting, but the twist was that it was in like a post-apocalyptic world, and that's what was going to make it different. So I told my friend that. They're like, "Oh, you mean like Terry Brooks and Shannara?" And I'm like, "What?" So that was how I stumbled upon him. But anyway, I really like his series. The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan is fantastic. The Spook's Apprentice is pretty good. That's for a younger audience, but I like it anyways. The Shadowhunter series. I could go on, so I'll just stop there.
No, you're fine. You mentioned Terry Brooks. My dad was a librarian and introduced me to Terry Brooks when I was in high school with the Magic Kingdom for Sale series, and then I started reading all the Shannara series. And you say it like I say it, Shannara. And when I started listening to audiobooks later, the narrators always say Shannara, and it drove me crazy.
Ah. No, I'm never gonna pronounce it that way.
I mean, everybody reads differently, but that's just a side note of Shannara made me annoyed with.
Yeah, I've never heard it pronounced that way.
That's good. I feel better. Oh, now I ruined it for you. Dang it. Ignore what I just said.
Okay, I'll erase it from my memory as soon as possible.
Perfect. I know you have a website, so if you can tell people how to find your website as well as any social media that they might be able to interact with you on.
Sure. The website is www.dragon-metal.com because Dragon Metal was taken. In terms of social media on Instagram, I'm at DJ Michael White, and then same tag for Twitter and same tag for TikTok. So that's where you can find me on social and on the web.
Okay, thank you. Wow, Dragon Metal was already taken. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, but there's nothing there. So someone bought the domain, but it just says claim this domain. It's someone bought it and just left it there. So that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
It also directs to that site from, if you want to just use jmichaelwhite.com, it directs there. And I think there's another web domain I bought that directs there too, but that doesn't really matter.
Okay, perfect.
And I do try to update. I have a blog there. I try to update once a month. So there, and that's usually where I'll post. I have some folks who do some great illustrations for me, just for promotional purposes. I'll post those there first, usually before I post them on social media. There's some exclusive things that I post there that I don't post on social media. So the website's a good place to check out if you're bored. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Jason, we've talked about the book. We talked about the series a little bit. Is there anything that we haven't covered, though, in terms of writing or the series or anything at all that you would like to mention during this time?
I don't think so. Just that I'm really humbled and at the reaction that I've gotten so far. There are a decent handful of people who have left me reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and the overall rating on both of those places is high, and that just really makes me feel good and encouraged. And like I said, humbled. It's always good to hear from those people. I have some readers that I've started talking to on Instagram, just direct messaging, and Twitter too. So it's just it's been great to hear from people who have kind of taken different things from the story, or they've kind of taken the story to heart and found something unique in it that maybe I didn't even intend. So it's been great to see that positive feedback early, and it's been nice to kind of hear some of the excitement for the series to continue. I think I mentioned the second book is coming out next year. I'm starting to write the third one. People are asking me a lot of things. They have a lot of theories because there are a lot of unanswered questions at the end of the first book, and that's prompted a lot of interesting discussion among the little fan base that I'm starting to develop. So it's just been really nice to see that so early. I wasn't expecting that at all. I knew that there was an audience for the book. I knew that if I brought people to it, they would enjoy it. I just didn't expect so many people to find it so quickly. So yeah, that's just really exciting for me and humbling and encouraging. So just grateful for everything.
It's wonderful. On your website, the cover for book 2 still says it's top secret. Is there a time frame for when people can see that?
November.
Okay.
And then September 15th. So later this week, I'll actually be dropping on the website and on social. I'll be dropping the synopsis for the second book, just the story summary that'll go on the back cover. And then in terms of the actual cover reveal, that'll be later this year.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. It was great. I appreciated you asking me to be on, and I appreciate the work that you do as well. It's not easy to interview people. I used to do it for a living, so I appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you again to Jason for taking the time to speak with me. If you listened to the last episode, you know that the last couple of interviews were not the easiest for me. Absolutely nothing to do with the authors or the books or anything like that. Just me having some anxiety around a lot of different things. But I was very grateful that Jason was kind and put up with my awkwardness. So thank you to Jason for taking the time to talk to me, but also putting up with my awkwardness, but mostly for taking the time to talk to me about this book. If you are a fan of young adult, if you're a fan of urban fantasy, if you're a fan of series, then you should definitely check out this first in this new series. My husband always says that he's not a fan of standalone books. They're fine, but he likes series. He likes books or series that go on for a long time, that he likes to listen to audiobooks. And so he's very excited when books are part of a series. And the longer that series, usually the better, because that means he can stretch it out for a long time, especially when he loves the characters and the world. And I can see this one being in our rotation at some point when it is when there are more books, because he loves to get to know characters and follow them through their journey and their character arcs. So looking forward to more in this series, and you should check it out if it's something that is of interest to you. Hope that you will join me for the next episode. I will be speaking to author Christian Carl. We get children's books. I don't often get a lot of children's books for the podcast. I'm always excited when I do. This is also a series of books. It is about a group of beings called the Umlauts. It is called Land of Lots, and we're going to get into more of that, of course, with the interview next episode. So join me for that. If you have not done so already, please like, subscribe, and follow on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on. That will ensure that you get all new episodes when they come out. Leave a review, very helpful, starred, written, whatever is in your heart to do at any given time. I really appreciate. And then also follow the podcast on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Love hearing from you. Hit me up with your questions. Tell me what you're reading, and just come interact with me on social media. I love it. Hope you're having a great day. I hope that your weekend goes as well as you would like it to, involving whatever activities you would like it to. And I especially hope that those activities involve plenty of time for you to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.